Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Wir werden jetzt einen Film sehen, der für den besonderen Anlass Bundesrepublik Deutschland 70 Jahre in der NATO besonders produziert worden ist. Viel Vergnügen!
For nearly 70 years, Germany has been a reliable part of NATO, working together in support of shared goals. From the beginning, Germany has contributed as a partner in the alliance, supporting peace, cooperation, and stability. 6th of May, 1955. Germany joins NATO. A new chapter begins. 12th of November, 1955. The Bundeswehr is founded. Defensive, democratic, dedicated. The Cold War. A world in tension. Freedom defended with resolve and unity.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
From 1988 to 1994, a German leads NATO, Manfred Wörner, a voice for strength and reconciliation. 1989, the Berlin Wall falls. 1990, Germany reunites. The Bundeswehr integrates the East German forces. 1991, NATO evolves toward peacekeeping and crisis response. 1995, first deployment to the Balkans. Germany acts for peace. 2001, 9/11. NATO invokes Article 5. Germany answers. Since 2001, missions worldwide. From Kabul to Kosovo, Germany stands with its allies. 2022. Russia's war against Ukraine marks a turning point.
To undermine the global rules that have kept Europe safe for decades.
Germany protects NATO's eastern flank. Following a decision by German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius, a permanent brigade in Lithuania is established. Clear commitment, lasting presence. We move forward, together, with unity, capability, and resolve. Germany in NATO, securing peace and freedom. Yesterday, today, tomorrow.
Liebe Gäste, es spricht zu Ihnen der Bundesminister der Verteidigung, Boris Pistorius.
Sehr geehrter Herr Bundeskanzler,
Federal Chancellor Friedrich Merz, former President of the German Bundestag, Professor Dr. Norbert Lammert, welcome. Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, dear Mark, Minister Wadephul, dear Joe, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, ambassadors, honorable ministers from Germany and from abroad, Military Bishop Dr. Fellenberg, representing the clergy, Bundeswehr Chief of Staff Carsten Breuer, State Secretaries, members of the German Bundestag, Admiral Cabo Dragone, General Clancy, Admiral Blount, representing all active and former admirals and generals present today, as well as the armed forces in general, top-ranking officials, representatives of the civil society, political community, business and scientific communities, members of the armed forces, ladies and gentlemen. Together we are stronger. Peace, freedom and democracy must be protected and defended, and we can only do that together. That is the pivotal idea on the basis of which NATO was established 76 years ago. An idea that is still valid today. Germany is proud to have been part of this important alliance for 70 years. This successful alliance and proud to have contributed towards its success. And we're grateful for the trust the members of the alliance placed in us when they admitted us into NATO a mere 10 years after the end of the Second World War. To the present day, it is mutual trust that protects us all and that makes us strong together. I'm delighted to welcome all of you to the Bendeler Block today. It is my particular honor to welcome our Federal Chancellor Friedrich Merz, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, and the military band of the Armed Forces of Lithuania.
Secretary General Rutte, your presence here today is more than a gesture of friendship. It is a visible sign of the strength of our alliance and of our shared commitment to peace and security. Today, as we celebrate 70 years of Germany in NATO, we are deeply grateful to stand together with our trusted allies. Thank you for standing with us side by side. Der heutige Tag ist
This is a moment to pause and to consider what we have achieved together. This moment is also an incentive and a summons not to relent in our efforts. NATO is facing challenges greater than anything it faced since the end of the Cold War. It has come under pressure. It has to prove its worth because of the revisionist violence Russia has perpetrated in Europe. To make sure our alliance remains successful, we Europeans need to take on more responsibility. And I have to say that at last we have to take on more responsibility. Germany is going to take the lead, ladies and gentlemen. I admire the founding members of NATO for their vision and courage they showed at the time. They made it possible for Germany to rearm itself and to find its way back to the community of Western democracies, knowing that together we are stronger. And they were right. A few decades later, the Cold War ended without NATO having to fire a single shot. Germany celebrated its reunification. The Soviet Union disintegrated. Opening up NATO to the states of Eastern and Central Europe was another courageous decision which proved to be right, and I am happy to welcome the representatives from the Baltic states here. In spite of this success, there was time and again the question whether NATO is still necessary today. No action, talk only, was a mocking reinterpretation of the NATO acronym. But NATO has proved again and again that it is not brain dead, and this is not the case. It has successfully adjusted to new security threats. International crisis management, out-of-area operations have shaped the work of the alliance. And again, Germany has helped write this chapter of alliance history. For us, this is inextricably linked with Afghanistan. After the shock of 9/11, for the first time the Mutual Defense Clause was invoked. Germany stood side by side with its allies. It's been the most extensive operation abroad in the history of the Bundeswehr so far. And today, Russia's brutal aggression against Ukraine. Welcome, Alexei, Ambassador to Ukraine, of Ukraine to Germany. So Russia's brutal aggression against Ukraine has finally silenced the question of whether NATO is relevant. Collective defense is once again a priority. Together, we will defend each and every centimeter of NATO territory, if need be. For a long time, Germany was located at the very interface between the East and the West, and this is why we bear a special responsibility today towards our partners at the eastern flank. My decision to deploy a brigade to Lithuania is a visible sign of our commitment, and it is also a clear message to Russia. I am very proud of the achievements of our men and women and our Lithuanian friends, who who are now the pioneers of this flagship project of what we call the Zeitenwende. Thank you very much for your great work. However, Germany's responsibility does not end in Lithuania. As a logistic hub at the very heart of the alliance, we make sure that Allied troops can be moved towards NATO's eastern flank if necessary. Our maritime forces make their contribution towards the security of the northwestern flank. At the same time, and that is important, especially today, we make sure that our military support of Ukraine is beyond any doubt.
My British colleague
John Healey and myself took on the joint chairmanship of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group a couple of weeks ago. After the United States, the Federal Republic of Germany remains the most substantial supporter of Ukraine, and that will not change in the future. To ensure that, we have proposed an ambitious budget for the years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, Putin has miscalculated. He has underestimated not only the fighting spirit of Ukraine, but also NATO's determination. In the past years, I have seen an alliance that moves closer together, that is closing ranks, that is growing in strength, with Sweden and Finland as new members. The NATO summit in The Hague sends out a clear message. Article 5 is incontrovertible. Together, we support our joint pledge. Together, we will invest 5% of our GDPs in defense and security-relevant sectors. The success of this summit, ladies and gentlemen, let me be clear about this, is also thanks to Secretary General Rutte and his strong leadership. Thank you, Mark. The success of this summit means that step by step Europe is taking on a greater role that we play within the alliance, and it has to be that way. As the strongest economy of Europe, Germany, of course, is going to shoulder the second largest capability package within NATO. Our allies can count on Germany. Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready, together, on both sides of the Atlantic. I have trust in NATO and the people that make it strong. Distinguished guests, over many years, many of you have contributed towards the success of this unique alliance. Many of you risk a lot, if not everything, for our security. So you have earned our respect, our appreciation, and our gratitude. In this day and age, we need to stand by each other when push comes to shove, for our alliance and for Europe. Together, we are stronger. Thank you very much.
Liebe Gäste, es spricht zu Ihnen.
Dear guests, let us now welcome the Federal Minister of Foreign Affairs, Johann Wadephul.
Sehr geehrter Herr Bundeskanzler,
Federal Chancellor, Federal Minister Pistorius, dear Boris, Secretary General, dear Mark, dear colleagues from the German Bundestag, Excellencies, members of the Bundeswehr, ladies and gentlemen. In December of 1949, Konrad Adenauer gave an interview to the Cleveland Plain Dealer, an American local newspaper. And this interview should make history, because for the first time he publicly said what back then sounded as something that was outrageous: the possibility of a rearmament of Germans. Possibly quite deliberately, he didn't choose the big stage. Not a speech before Parliament, no government declaration, a culture of restraint. That was the order of the day. The thought that Germans could bear arms again needed to be formulated cautiously, and yet still the situation required Germany to embark down that road. The path of the Federal Republic into NATO was far from a given. its accession in May 1955, ladies and gentlemen, 10 years after the end of this atrocious war unleashed by Germans on this continent, that was a foreign policy milestone, and this is something that tends to be overlooked in German debates. It happened before the Bundeswehr was established in November of the same year. German security policy did not begin with the establishment of armed forces, but with a deliberate decision to embed our defense into an alliance from the very beginning. And alliance, that means one for all for one, without any ifs or buts. That describes the magnitude of the decision by Adenauer back then and the scope of commitment of the Allies towards us. NATO membership is a commitment to a defense alliance, but it's much more. It's a commitment to a community of values which represents security and freedom. We Germans have benefited from this alliance like virtually no other, because during the Cold War, the Federal Republic of Germany was NATO's eastern flank. This is where hundreds of thousands of Allied troops stood side by side the Bundeswehr. The fact that these allies sent soldiers barely 1 decade after the abyss of the World War and the Shoah was a display of trust and a major act of reconciliation, and we need to be grateful for that. I served in the 1980s as a temporary career volunteer at NATO's eastern flank, which ran through the divided Germany. 40 years later, I served as a reservist in Lithuania, where right now eastern flank of NATO is situated right now. A lot has changed in these 40 years, but the most important thing did not change. Soldiers, men and women, are serving under the blue flag of NATO together, and they are willing to give their all if needed. We know about the significance of this community. No country, not Germany, no one can defend its freedom, its security, and its democratic values alone. This anniversary, which we're celebrating today, is much more than a mere ceremony. Gratitude today means to continue to strengthen NATO's alliance with determination and resolve. Today we're faced with a new strategic reality. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine has made it clear to us how fragile security and peace can still be, even in Europe, that many deem to be a continent of eternal peace. Let me be clear. We will see in Ukraine whether borders can be changed by the use of force on the European continent, and whether our security architecture stands strong. It is up to us, it depends on us, and it entails major tasks. We need to drastically adapt our defense expenditures to levels which were normal in the 1980s. NATO of the future needs to become more agile, more determined, and more superior, technologically speaking, and we took major decisions during the NATO summit. And after the summit, we're talking about essential things: our credibility, the credibility of our deterrence, and our military capabilities. We must and will accomplish this Herculean task. Our strength lies in unity. 70 years of NATO membership of Germany. This is more than just a historical milestone. It's a promise for the future. It's the fact that we're willing to shoulder responsibility alongside our allies. NATO is facing challenges it hasn't seen in decades, and we are facing challenges we haven't seen in decades. We all need to see clearly on this. We who are bearing political responsibility. What's at stake is our security, our freedom, and our prosperity. And a strong NATO is the guarantor for peace on our continent. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to a festive evening. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, we will now listen to music. And harmony in music is a difficult endeavor. Our special thanks and gratitude goes to the Lithuanian armed forces, and this brought us to the idea to present a new project. We have the Staff Music Corps of the Federal Armed Forces, together with the Music Corps of the Lithuanian Armed Forces, are going to guide us through this evening, and we will now listen to the Liberty Fanfare.
Meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, liebe Gäste, der Bundeskanzler der Bundesrepublik Deutschland, Friedrich Merz.
Sehr geehrter Herr Generalsekretär,
Secretary General, ministers, colleagues from the German Bundestag, members of the German Armed Forces and civilian staff of the Federal Armed Forces, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Germany's place is alongside the peoples of the free world. There is no discussion about that. There cannot be a discussion about that. The first Federal Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, Konrad Adenauer, coined these words 1954 before the German Bundestag, almost exactly 1 year before Germany would join NATO. The truth, however, is there were discussions about this, controversial, very controversial discussions in our European neighboring countries, and also especially in the young Federal Republic. Hardly anything was a given in the decade after the end of the Second World War, certainly not the rearmament of our country. The position of divided Germany in the world remained an open question. 70 years ago, the year I was born, the young Federal Republic of Germany answered this question with its accession to NATO in the sense of freedom, in the sense of its alignment with the West, and in the sense of a transatlantic partnership. It was a consequential decision. It was and remains the basis for the fact that 3 generations could grow up in Germany knowing nothing else but freedom, peace, and security. First in the West and later in our reunited homeland. Ladies and gentlemen, we're celebrating the anniversary of Germany's accession to NATO in historic times indeed, in times of great geopolitical upheavals, in times of new open questions, in times of a Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, and in times of massive Russian and other hybrid attacks on NATO and also on Germany. We're celebrating this anniversary at the same time immediately after a historic NATO summit, where we sent out a sign of unity and resolve to the entire world. End of June, a couple of days ago, we met in The Hague and decided as allies together to significantly increase defense spending. Together, we committed ourselves to our pledges, as was said before, one for all and all for one. It was the pivotal signal. We can and we will give answers to the challenges of this new era as an alliance. This alliance is alive and kicking and shoulders our collective security. That is a historic achievement. And, Secretary General, at this point in time, I'd like to thank you and express my gratitude to you. Your diplomatic skills, we owe it to your diplomatic skills that this NATO summit was so successful. Our alliance can be glad that we have such a unifying and at the same time energetic and active Secretary General at the helm of NATO. Ladies and gentlemen, in Germany, we put our noses to the grindstone. We had to catch up a lot. We have to be honest. Germany, far too long, was not willing to pay for its own security because seemingly it worked out the way it did. Raised eyebrows on the other side of the Atlantic, the warnings of our partners in Central and Eastern Europe against the backdrop of an aggressive and ever more aggressive revisionism were far too often simply shrugged off. In spite of the Russian attacks on Georgia, the occupation of Crimea and the Donbas, it took Russia's war of aggression against the entire Ukraine until finally also Germany and people realized that our defense capabilities is not a task that we can procrastinate or outsource. It is in our best intrinsic interest, and it is our very own task today. The Ukrainian cities attacked by Putin's Russia up until last night, they hardly are 2 hours away from us by plane. The provocations and aggressions emanating from Russia's shadow fleet, they happen in the Baltic Sea. These acts of sabotage, Putin's hybrid warfare, are directed at our critical infrastructure, our social cohesion, and our democratic stability. Putin's murders, the murders he commands, happen in the midst of Europe, here in Berlin, just a few yards away from this location. So the situation is serious indeed, and this is why we say today, on this important day, we are fully convinced, and we say we take our responsibility seriously to defend the freedom in the Euro-Atlantic sphere, something that we committed to 70 years ago with our accession to NATO. And we take it seriously, not just in words, but also in deeds. A few weeks ago, we amended Germany's basic law in the German Bundestag in order to be able to allocate the necessary funds for defense. The federal budget now reflects our increase in defense spending, and we are doing everything in order to turn the federal armed forces into the strongest conventional army in the European Union, as it is appropriate for a country our size and with our economic clout, and as it is rightly expected by our allies. Let me express my gratitude to our Minister of Defense, Boris Pistorius, who, with a lot of expertise and energy, has been promoting this reorientation of the federal armed forces, the Bundeswehr, in the past years. Thank you very much. And I would like to also thank the members of the German armed forces who are serving these days. You serve on behalf of freedom in Germany, but also at NATO's external borders or elsewhere, where we need to prepare diligently for every scenario. I participated and I was at the activation ceremony in Lithuania in May, and I want to reiterate here, we could be sure and count on NATO support during the Cold War. It is up to us to show that our allies can rely on us, and we're doing so also with the brigade stationed in Lithuania. Europe as a whole can count and rely on the Federal Republic of Germany. We are going to take the lead when it comes to strengthening NATO's European pillar. And I would like to emphasize here again, we are going to continue to support Ukraine which defends our freedom. The path towards a just peace leads via strength, not via surrendering to an aggressor. And a just peace, yes, this is what we want for the freedom and the security in Europe and in the transatlantic sphere. Ladies and gentlemen, this is also a consequence and a conclusion when we say Germany's place is alongside the peoples of the free world. This decision taken 70 years ago with our accession to NATO is something that we need to reaffirm and renew today. It's a mission, our task in policy, but it's also our task in society. It's a task for all of society, especially because NATO is an alliance of liberal democratic states. Free peoples live from their midst, and the foundation of values that shoulders NATO and keeps NATO together depends on the center of societies, the middle of societies. And that means that we're all called to live freedom and responsibility in all generations, in the entire society, in all parts of the country. Vigilance is the price of freedom, and at the same time, we as Germans know from historic experience and in a very special way, the value of freedom is priceless. To be able to live in freedom, in peace and security, this is the greatest gift that was given to us who were born after 1955. And at the same time, it's the largest, the biggest achievement. And we're fortunate to participate and partake in this achievement. To keep this knowledge alive, this historic knowledge alive, and keep it truly alive and awake, and to make headway, to forge ahead in this knowledge within Europe and within the NATO alliance. This is our mission today. Thank you for your attention.
Dames en heren, de secretaris-generaal van de NAVO, de Herr Mark Rutte, meine Damen und Herren, der Generalsekretär.
Ladies and gentlemen, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte.
Sehr geehrter Herr Bundeskanzler Merz,
Chancellor Merz,
sehr geehrter Herr Bundesminister Pistorius,
Minister Pistorius,
sehr geehrter Herr Bundesminister Wadephul,
Minister Wadephul,
lieber Friedrich, lieber Boris,
dear Friedrich, Boris and Johann,
liebe Soldatinnen und Soldaten, Exzellenzen,
members of the armed forces, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. What an honor it is to join you here in Berlin to mark a truly meaningful day. I am reminded of this event more often than you might think. In my office at NATO headquarters, there's a large black and white photograph on the wall right above my desk. It captures the moment the Federal Republic of Germany signed the Protocol of Accession to NATO. That was in October 1954. This paved the way to Germany's formal accession to NATO a few months later, on the 9th of May 1955. This historic event we celebrate today. In the photograph, you can see 14 foreign ministers of the alliance sitting at a table at NATO headquarters in Paris, where it was at the time, with the Eiffel Tower clearly in view. The French Foreign Minister Pierre Mendès France is the one signing the protocol. And it's a symbolic act, with Konrad Adenauer standing beside him. Just imagine a former member of the Resistance signing a document which sets the course for the collective defense of Germany, France, and other allied nations, barely 10 years after the end of the Second World War. It was history in the making, the start of a success story that continues today. Success should be celebrated, as we did in late April, when I had the honor of welcoming President Steinmeier to NATO headquarters. And you too, Boris, as well as the Bundeswehr military band. We celebrated 70 years of Germany within NATO at NATO premises. And today, I am so honored to join you here in Berlin for this special ceremony. So, as we are here to mark the occasion, let me briefly take you back to the day Germany formally joined NATO, on the 9th of May, 1955. On this day, Konrad Adenauer delivered an emotional statement. He affirmed the federal government's determination to strive together with the other member states for peace and freedom. He thanked the Allies for supporting Germany's integration into the community of free nations and vowed that within this community, within NATO, Germany will be an able and reliable partner. The Chancellor made good on this promise, as did his successors over the last 7 decades. From the day you became a NATO member, Germany has played a major role in our alliance. During the Cold War, you hosted massive military deployments of Allied forces on your soil in the Federal Republic, and this was crucial to deter the Soviet Union. After the Cold War, a reunited Germany made the case for building bridges, developing partnerships, and giving the new democracies in Central and Eastern Europe a home in NATO. Germany has been indispensable for NATO's success in military operations beyond our borders. Germany sent aircraft and then deployed forces. And with your help, we ended the bloodshed in the Balkans. And your troops in Afghanistan helped ensure the country would not be a safe haven for international terrorism. And in their service to our shared security, German soldiers have paid the ultimate price. When allies ask for support, Germany is right there by their side. You lead NATO's forward land forces in Lithuania. You've deployed a brigade to Lithuania. Your jets conduct air patrols over Baltic skies. And you provide maritime support for key supply routes and critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea. And when Ukraine needs our support, Germany answers the call. You are the largest European contributor of military aid to Ukraine, helping the Ukrainian people defend their freedom and their sovereignty. You host the NATO command in Wiesbaden that coordinates the provision of military equipment and training to Ukraine. And you provide critical air defense for a logistic hub in Poland that helps ensure that the support Ukraine needs gets where it needs to go. As the world becomes more dangerous and our security is at stake, Germany continues to step up. You are spending more and more on defense, and your defense industry is accelerating production. That is exactly what we need. At the NATO summit in The Hague 2 weeks ago, Allied leaders agreed to invest 5% of their GDPs in defense, 3.5% for core defense requirements. This includes air and missile defense systems, tanks, aircraft, drone, ammunition, and more. It's what we need to protect our 1 billion people living on the territory of the Alliance. Chancellor Merz, dear Friedrich, in The Hague you announced that Germany intends to reach the 3.5% goal, and not in 2035, but as early as 2029. By 2029, you plan to invest 150 billion in defense. That means you will have more than double the amount in less than 10 years. That is remarkable. This is leadership. Germany is a driving force in our alliance. Your leadership and decisive actions are what we need to build a stronger, fairer, and more lethal NATO. And it is what we need to preserve freedom and security, now and in the future. The world has changed profoundly since May 1955. But Konrad Adenauer's words that he spoke that day still hold true. Able and reliable. Thank you, Germany, for everything you do for our alliance. Distinguished guests, now is the time to listen to another musical masterpiece. And now the director will be Major Anishauskas, who will be directing a combined Lithuanian and German military band. And the piece is called Technisch Schaukia. It means protect your home. This takes us to the next part of our event, the award of NATO's Youth Award, to be carried out by our Minister of Defense, Boris Pistorius. And can I ask Julian Engelhorn, Julius Timmermann and Malte Lauterbach to come here? They are here. But before I start, I would like to thank the members of this joint German and Lithuanian band. Thank you very much for this wonderful musical accompaniment. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, on the occasion of the 70th anniversary of Germany's NATO membership, we asked young people for their view on the question, what does NATO mean for me today and in the future? That was the question we asked. The answers we got in the shape of numerous essays were impressive in their clarity, their depth and their earnestness. The answers clearly show how far Russia's brutal aggression against Ukraine has affected this generation. The contributions we received, of course, reflect the concern that many young people feel about how to secure peace and prosperity in Europe in the future. One message was reflected in many contributions. For many young people, NATO is far more than an abstract alliance. It is a beacon of hope. For them, the alliance with our transatlantic partners stands for freedom, stability, and a secure future. At the same time, the authors of these contributions clearly say what they expect NATO and the German government to do. They demand that NATO must do more to adapt to the new threats that we are facing in this digital age, and they wish for Germany to take on a leading role within the alliance. I am pleased that the young people are not trying to shirk away their responsibility. They are aware that security cannot be the sole responsibility of states and institutions. It is a task for society as a whole, a task that affects us all. Ladies and gentlemen, many of the decisions on our security agenda directly affect young people. It is very often about their future. We incur debts in order to defend our freedom and security. We ask them to do military service and to sacrifice part of their lives for the security of our country. This is why it is important to actively involve young people in security debates and to take their positions into account. So I'm particularly pleased to see that apart from the winners of this award, we also have representatives of youth organizations in the security fields and representatives of Bundeswehr training facilities here today. Your commitment represents many young people in our society, and it clearly shows the next generation is not content to watch. They want to participate, and they are prepared to take on responsibility. Mr. Lauterbach, Mr. Timmermann, Mr. Engelhorn, let me now talk about you, the winners of this year's award. The three of you convinced the 5 experts on our panel of judges, to whom I would like to express my gratitude. Your essays convinced them more than any others. Julian Engelhorn, you have reached 3rd place, and at nearly 18 years, you are the youngest participant of this competition. This summer, you graduated from grammar school in Mannheim, and you decided to join the Bundeswehr as a temporary career volunteer. What matters for you is for NATO not to lose sight of the values they are defending, values that all member states share. The 2nd place goes to Julius Timmermann. He's 22 years old, a medical student, member of the Volunteer Fire Department and member of the Bundeswehr Reserve Forces. Thus, he sets a strong example for active commitment to overall defense. For you, NATO is above all a symbol of community. The European or American fellow soldiers standing side by side with you during reserve duty, but also at wartime if NATO territory was to be attacked. In your essay, you campaign for courageous citizens who are prepared to defend our country and our alliance. Malte Lauterbach, you are 21 years old, you come from Bad Nauheim, and you have taken 1st place. Apart from studying political science and economics, you have worked as a reporter in areas of conflict for the last 2 years. This work has taken you to Ukraine and the Middle East, among others. In your essay, you give us a graphic description of your experiences during a drone attack on Kiev in 2024. For you, NATO is the force that prevents this reality of war that you experienced firsthand from becoming a reality for us here. Congratulations to all of you. Your essays prove the different angles from which young people look at this question and how important it is to include you. You and your co-competitors have shown young people are, of course, ready to take on responsibility. You want to shape the future. You have energy and ideas. I wish you all the best for your future. Remain hungry, remain active and curious. Ask questions and make contributions, make proposals. It is this lively exchange of views which helps our society move forward. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, now the Lithuanian-German band will delight us once again with a piece called Celebrate the Day by Herbert Grönemeyer and directed by Lieutenant Colonel Kiauka.